Okay, this is Mr. Reed coming at you live. Today we're going to be talking about the Paper Stew styled midterm exam, the student sample. I'm assuming that you are coming into this having already read that student sample. If not, please make sure you go ahead and do so that you are familiar with the content. Today I'm going to just be providing some of my own insights, some moments of gravity, some things that I think are really working well as some points of improvement for future writing purposes. So to start with, the student chose to do Ocean Vuong's Kissing in Vietnamese, and Margaret Atwood's backdrop addresses Cowboy. And the prompt is, how is the identity of characters challenged, or how does it change in two works that you have studied? We're going to go look at the introductory paragraph here, and just a little comment that I made, actually a couple comments. The student decided to choose the word choice of opponent, highlights both the attitudes of the poem's speakers, their placement within the text. So there's clearly a power dynamic, which I'll mention in just a minute, and showcases an understanding of how the identity of speaker plays as a commentary on the topic of otherization in both works. And in my second comment there, you can see that the use of otherization, which is a common perspective / theme, works throughout this entire piece. So although the student is providing their own insights on the reading itself, they are clearly using a post-colonial lens to help with their specific reading of the text. And that's pretty key. Lastly, the student also talks a little bit about the shift in the role of the traditional speaker to a lesser heard marginalized speaker, in this case, both poems, and is created through different uses of devices, right? So aside from just kind of identifying that, they are able to explain out how these devices lead to a wider conversation about marginalization in the respective poems and what's happening within those poems. This is a solid example of cause and effect thesis writing. This is the only real commentary that I have in terms of points of improvement for this essay. This is actually a really very well-written essay. The first part, and again, this wasn't something that I was grading for the midterm here, but just kind of as a point of reference for everybody, that when we're writing, just remember that every paragraph needs to have its focus. So explain to your readers the importance of rhyme as a lead-in. This should be the focal point of your paragraph. So again, think about like, this is part of the wider thesis statement. You know, what are you specifically going to be discussing in depth? And what are you planning on achieving? What are we supposed to learn from this in that first sentence? That being said, the remainder of this paragraph, quite good. So using rhyme as a means of assessing how fear as a theme functions both introspectively and retroactively is an excellent take, as this the student discusses on the use of the representational nature of war as a means of making a commentary about how it affects different communities. And again, like the retroactivity, introspectivity, those are conclusions that student drew on their own, which is great, and I'm glad that they integrated that within their analysis. The student would want to infer what the role the U.S. is playing specifically, especially as it is the first body paragraph. Like what role does the U.S. play in Atwood's poem, specifically in terms of this wider conversation about war. But the student also does a really good job of explaining out Vuong and the relationship between family and the Vietnamese War, and the impact that has on the speaker. Lastly, I would also want the student to talk a little bit about, especially because they're looking at rhyme, thinking about diction and how diction plays a role in the overall tone of the piece. And we know that every poem has sort of a tonal arc, right? So where are we seeing that within the greater work itself, and how does that tie to this understanding of identity? All right, moving on to the next paragraph here, something I wanted to just mention again. When we're talking about organization, right, like we have a clear-cut topic sentence that pulls directly from our thesis statement. We have our examples that are pulled directly from the text itself, and then we have our analysis, which ties the evidence back to the initial claim here. This student did a really good job of laying this out paragraph by paragraph, so I've just gone ahead and color-coded it. This particular paragraph talks about perspective and the significance of that. But one thing that I did note about this is, although the student doesn't directly state that this is their topic sentence, the sentence and the final sentence shed light on ways language operate within both texts in relationship to how the concept of identity is challenged. Pulling specifics from each poem, this forces us as readers to consider the wider global implications of both text, so i.e. like the psychological effects of war, the concept of expansionism and some of the negative aspects of that, as well as imperialism. Moving on. All right, so here, what I commented, through the use of sound devices, the student is able to see and explain transition of how lyricism plays to the shifts in tone and narration, which is, I think, again, is very appropriate to the prompt. And in general, the student thus far showcases a range of register and application. The student really exercised their knowledge about what they've learned over the course of this semester. There's just such a range of different examples that the student's pulling from. But I feel that each paragraph very much coherently explains how that register, right, that criterion B, which this is graded on, connects with the prompt. Again, in this paragraph, the student explores the use of diction, right, in explaining how both texts convey different approaches to what the prompt is asking. And although the prompt doesn't necessarily require you to talk about context, right? This student chose to explain how context plays a role in which the values, beliefs, and attitudes of the author influences the text. So very much drawing from this idea that context plays a significant role in how certain ideas are communicated through the text. Again, solid job there. Moving on to another paragraph. I've gone ahead, I've just highlighted, again, I mentioned this earlier, but although the student frames this paragraph at once focusing on perspective, the concept of identity is still at the forefront. Through the use of metaphor and sibilance, the student argues how the speaker in Atwood's work is marginalized. Really great job there. And that is it. So if you have other questions, just please let me know. Thank you.